are these people?
We're going to start off with a story about water. Actually, water. What?
Water.
That's not supposed to show my tabs. What's going on here? Okay, anyway. Water. So, EPA reverses course, drops limits on 3 dangerous fire retardant chemicals. Yay! Let's get forever chemicals back in our drinking water. Okay, so this is out of Sludge, and I've got a few Sludge stories tonight. Sludge has been doing some killer work lately. Donald Shaw. All right. In a win for chemical companies like Chemours and 3M, the EPA has scrapped Biden administration rules targeting 3 toxic PFAS chemicals in drinking water, despite their links to cancer and immune system harm. That's not good. All right. Erin Brockovich, I remember, celebrated this when they passed it. You know, this is bad. Echoing the demands of chemical industry lobbyists, Trump administration has moved to weaken Biden-era drinking water protections by halting regulations on 3 toxic forever chemicals linked to cancer, liver damage, and immune dysfunction. Why? Well, because they just want to undo everything that's already being done. The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, of course, announced today that it will rescind drinking water regulations on 3 widely used per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, which are called PFAS, all right, along with a hazard index approach that treats them as a cumulative health threat when found together. So the cumulative effect can be worse and can certainly be cancerous, and they don't want us looking at that because, of course, they're there to protect their corporate buddies and their. This is straight corporate cronyism. Who's running the EPA right now? I'm not really sure. They'll probably mention the head of the EPA that Trump named here. But these fire retardant chemicals, which are used in everything from nonstick cookware to waterproof clothing and grease-proof
Lee
food.
Zeldin.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The douchebag from New York. A Zionist from New York. What a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Who was in Congress for years out of Long Island. He's a total asshole. All right.
Long Island.
Grease-proof food packaging are part of it. He ran for governor of New York and lost, I remember, too. Part of a class known as Forever Chemicals.
Long Island grease-proof.
Yeah, well, he's not grease-proof. He's full of grease. All right. Or their long-lasting... All right, they're known as Forever Chemicals for their long-lasting environmental impact and their resistance to breaking down the human body. Thanks. The chemicals have been found in tap water across the country and in the blood of 98% of Americans, so nothing that we need to worry about or anything. Scientific studies have linked exposure to elevated risks of kidney and testicular cancer, reproductive harm, metabolic disorders, and immune system suppression. Nothing to worry about there. Man, again, this is to protect against the lawsuits, honestly, because the minute that 98% of the country knows that they were poisoned with cancerous chemicals, they will start to try to sue. And this is meant to head off the lawsuit because people will start to realize, oh, if we take the chemicals out, people will stop getting sick. And then the people who were getting sick will realize that this is what was making them sick and sue us for that. That's what all of this is.
We don't have time for rational solutions.
This is all to avoid litigation. The decision is a sharp reversal from the Biden admin's regulations finalized a year ago, which included these substances alongside the better-known PFOA and PFOS, which will remain regulated. Well, at least they're doing something. Thanks.
Yeah.
The move follows years of lobbying and litigation threats from trade groups of chemical manufacturers, like we said, such as Chemours, 3M, and DuPont, which have been tied to widespread PFAS contamination. Of course, follow the money, which is what Sludge does an excellent job of doing. Right? In its announcement, the EPA said it was rescinding regulation of those substances to ensure its determinations follow the legal process laid out in the Safe Drinking Water Act. It's the same argument that chemical companies used when they were fighting the Biden regulations. But now they have a friendly, a more corporate-friendly president, unbelievably enough.
Yeah.
All right? Totally open to bribes. All they have to do is buy some Trump shitcoin and he'll let them do whatever the fuck they want. For example, in a May 2023 regulatory filing, Gen X maker Gen X maker Chemours argued that the EPA's proposed regulation of the chemicals violates the Safe Drinking Water Act by illegally regulating mixtures without statutory authority and bypassing its requirement that decisions regulate a containment are based on occurrence data. Well, you can't measure it, so it didn't occur. Like what?
Yep.
Public health advocates warn that removing these chemicals from the regulations leaves millions of Americans at continued risk. No surprise. The PFAS contamination crisis is much larger than just two chemicals, and there's increasing evidence that other fire retardant chemicals that pollute water harm health. Okay? Eliminating all PFAS chemicals from drinking water is an urgent public health priority. Sludge is $5 a month. It is one of the better outlets right now that's out there following what the hell's happening and holding people accountable. It's two guys. It's Donald Shaw and David Moore. And we're going to bring an article from David Moore later on tonight. So kudos to Sludge for staying on fire retardant chemicals. They're also doing good work on the crypto industry. They're one of the better ones out there, and for two dudes, and they're like they're a nonprofit, like legit registered nonprofit with no corporate funding whatsoever. So they are able to follow the money. Somebody we haven't shown in a while is Erin Brockovich. You may know who Erin Brockovich is, and she's actually going to talk here a little bit about Kansas. All right, which is where she's from, and she's going to talk a little bit about the movie that she's in, and then I'm going to bring another Erin Brockovich story, which is twice as horrifying as this one, amazingly enough. All right, so this story is about we're not in Kansas anymore. She says, as many of you know, I grew up in Kansas and the land of sprawling wheat fields and bright yellow sunflowers. My family lived in Lawrence, just a few hours north of Wichita. I have a friend who lives there. He says they call it Wichita. All right, the state's most populous city. So she recently got a note from Sarah in Wichita saying, thank you for writing Superman's Not Coming. You encouraged and inspired me to keep pushing this issue. We successfully filed a class action lawsuit against Textron Aviation last week, and the local news has covered it heavily. What happened? Up to 300 homes in East Wichita sit above a toxic plume of chemicals, putting their health at risk and damaging their property values, according to attorneys representing the group. While everyone else is talking about the possibility of Trump accepting a luxury jet from Qatar, let's talk about the aviation industry and its impact on Sarah and her neighbors in Kansas, because this story is all too American. First, did you know that Wichita is even considered the air capital of the world? I certainly did not. So she gives a little history of Wichita, the Wright brothers' first flight, and why all these different organizations set up shop there. All right. The Textron Bell flight, which is Cessna Beechcraft, Bombardier Learjet, Spirit Aerosystems, which is now famously part of Boeing, and Airbus. They all have stuff set up there. So she goes back into her history. In the early 90s, for those who haven't watched the movie and those who aren't older like me, Erin Brockovich was working in Hinckley, California, discovering that a carcinogen called hexavalent chromium, which is also known as chromium-6, had contaminated the water in town, leading to a years-long environmental investigation and lawsuit that would eventually turn into a movie titled Erin Brockovich. She thought Hinckley was a one-off incident initially, but she soon started to learn that there were Hinkleys everywhere. And she even says that at the end. She says, I'm fighting now for Kettleman, which is 10 times the settlement. Julia Roberts played her. She's an ex-beauty queen. As our manufacturing industries were building their companies and profits in small towns and cities throughout the country, the contamination of our soil and drinking water began to rise with their toxic chemical leftovers. Why does all of this matter? So she says, starting in the 1990s, TCE, which is a colorless, non-flammable liquid solvent, was used in both industrial and household items and became a popular metal degreasing agent. Said in a different way, manufacturers used it to remove grease and dirt from metal parts. It was a favorite in the aircraft industry, right? Most people get exposed to TCE by consuming contaminated drinking water. The water becomes contaminated from some combination of industry discharge or spills and existing hazardous waste sites. TCE breaks down slowly like a forever chemical and can move through soil to find its way into drinking water sources. So they need to have a separate barrier, I'm sure. TCE is a known human carcinogen, and prolonged or repeated exposure can cause kidney cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, or liver cancer. It also can cause damage to the central nervous system, liver, kidneys, immune system, reproductive organs, and fetal heart defects. So it's fucking bad. And it's still a problem. Last December 2024, the EPA issued a final rule regarding TCE, which bans the manufacture, including import, processing, and distribution in commerce of TCE for all uses, including airplane degreasing. But the EPA has received multiple petitions for review of the final rule. Also, due to a January 20th memo from Trump entitled, quote, "Regulatory freeze pending review," unquote, the EPA temporarily delayed the effective date of the rule, so we're not in the clear yet. So this fucking damaging, deadly chemical is still legal for them to use and contaminate right now. So she says, let's get back to Kansas. In the early 90s, defense contractor Raytheon, then owner of an aviation plant in Wichita, discovered solvent contamination in the soil and groundwater. And this goes a little down a rabbit hole, right? The solvents were tracked back to 3 buildings on the campus where employees used equipment like vapor degreasers to clean and prepare metal for manufacturing. Makes sense. The chemicals seeped into the groundwater, creating a chemical plume that started at the plant and flowed outward because they didn't protect soil under the land and put vapor barriers and stuff. Among the chemicals discovered in the plume, TCE. The plume now stretches beyond the plant property. Now neighbors of the plant are launching a class action lawsuit. The Kansas Department of Health and Environment monitors the situation and has designated the area as the Textron Aviation Site. Let's get clear. The groundwater contamination gets discovered in 1993. The levels in the groundwater below the facility are up to 20,000 times higher than safe levels, according to facility reports. The facility themselves admits this. But in 2007, Raytheon is sold to Hawker Beechcraft Corporation, which then declares bankruptcy in 2012, emerging from bankruptcy in 2013 as Beechcraft Corp Textron, Inc., then purchases the facility and is now known as Textron Aviation. So it goes through, she says, now this year in 2025, neighbors filed a lawsuit more than 30 years later, and people are still trying to get this one manufacturing plant site to clean up its mess. She says, I mentioned this company Hot Potato because it's one of the ways that corporations shirk environmental responsibility. Companies move on. Whether they declare bankruptcy, spin off into a new organization, or move locations while the contamination stays put or grows. People pick a neighborhood to live in because it's quiet, it has tree-lined streets, or it feels like a nice place for their kids to ride their bikes. They don't think about whether a chemical plume will go unnoticed for years and then potentially cause their whole family to get sick or their property values to plummet. Environmental pollution is not easy to detect or prove. It's part of why regulating industry can be so difficult. It takes years to build scientific case to prove the harmful effects certain chemicals have on our health. Many toxic chemicals have latency periods of 10, 20, 30 years. But bad players need to be called out and dots need to be connected. And I love that she's not pulling any punches, but this affects every one of us. We all need to drink clean water. Throughout the 1990s, Raytheon bought out companies and inherited environmental headaches as they discovered that chemicals used by those companies had seeped into the soil and groundwater, according to the Tampa Bay Times. But that's obvious. In 2008, the paper reported that more than 90 federal lawsuits sought to make Raytheon pay for removing or cleaning up tainted soil. Residents in the Azalea neighborhood in St. Petersburg sought legal help back then to help get a cleanup. All right. As soon as they found out the company was running remediation programs in 45 locations, which cost them about $149 million, according to company reports, something very similar happened in Arizona. Hughes Aircraft opened a manufacturing plant in Tucson in 1950, using chemicals like TCE to degrease metal parts. Let's just assume at the time that people didn't know it might cause cancer. Time goes on, chemicals leak into the soil, and the contamination spreads. In 1978, water pollution turns up in residents' private wells, which is often where we find these toxic chemicals. By 81, an unusual cluster of health problems, including cancer, sprout up near the plant. Again, 31 years from when they first opened the plant. The site goes on the EPA's Superfund list in 1983, meaning it's a designated a cleanup site. By 91,
Right.
Hughes settles a class action lawsuit for $84.5 million. Raytheon buys the plant in the mid-90s, knowing the pollution is still there. And then in 2006, the EPA finds that Raytheon's cleanup facility has been allowing unsafe levels of TCE in the water being used by 50,000 Tucson residents. No big deal, right? And the cycle continues.
Yeah, seems fine.
Let's get back to Florida. In 2023, city leaders in St. Pete approved a new condo project with 1,000 homes at the old Raytheon site in the Azalea neighborhood. We continue to build on homes on documented toxic sites. What the fuck? Like we're out of space. Residents signed a petition in opposition to the new development, and it gained more than 1,500 signatures before the city council meeting. And what's going to happen is people are going to move in there from out of town that won't know about what happened there.
Yeah.
Why don't we listen to the people? We know housing is another huge issue in this country, but no one wants to live at a toxic waste site. What is a plume? It is a contaminated groundwater plume. A contaminated groundwater plume exists when hazardous substances, pollutants, or contaminants are present within an aquifer system. A plume of contaminated groundwater may be formed when substances are released to groundwater from a source at a facility. The contaminated plume can spread horizontally, vertically, and transversely through the aquifer system by means of infiltration, migration, inter-aquifer exchange, and interaction with surface water. Again, she's done her homework on this shit. Right, aquifer. Sorry.
Yeah.
She knows her shit. She's not like sounding the alarm bell for no reason. She says, my biggest hope is that our communities can find relief. In Kansas, in Florida, in Arizona, everywhere. We need better technologies to help us remediate contaminated sites. We need private industry, usually the polluters, to foot the bill, not their neighbors. Remember, we fund the EPA with our tax dollars. Well, the government funds the EPA if you ask the MMT people. And Trump's going to say nobody funds the EPA if you ask him. These companies post billion-dollar profits while people suffer. Yes, it's time for a change. It starts with more communities understanding that they're not alone in these toxic incidents and starting to sue the companies more. Class action lawsuits, but they're expensive, they take a long time, and people suffer and die in the process. It sucks. Again, the BrockovichReport.com. Erin's actually been going live once a week lately. Definitely support her. But I'm not done with her here because she wrote this one. Oh my God. It's a literal shit show. Manure is triggering drinking water issues, and more than 122 million Americans are at risk. So nothing to see here. Please disperse. This one's wow. All right. She says water contamination comes from many sources, including industrial discharges, agricultural runoff, and inadequate sewage treatment. Now, a new analysis shows troubling levels of cancer-causing disinfection byproducts in the drinking water of more than 122 million people living in the United States. No big deal. Don't regulate your industry, folks. Deregulation is a good thing, right? Just ask any libertarian, they'll tell you. Sorry to poke fun at my libertarian brothers and sisters. One of the biggest sources, right? One of the biggest sources of this problem is organic materials such as manure runoff from livestock factory farming operations is reacting with the disinfectants used to treat public drinking water systems and creating these dangerous byproducts. Gross. U.S. factory farms produce 941 billion pounds of shit each year. Double the weight in human sewage produced by the entire U.S. population, according to a report last year. She's covered DPBs before, but the news here is that organic material, and specifically manure, has become a big problem for our drinking water. Not good. Not good. Let's talk about how this happens and how you can protect yourself. So what I like about her is she doesn't just sound the alarm bell, but she actually gives you some simple solutions. Right? Drinking water comes from many natural water sources, of course, such as lakes, rivers, and streams, and it generally contains organic matter, leaves, dirt, fish excrement, and so on. Adding chlorine, which is a disinfectant to water, is one of the primary water treatment methods that we've used because it's highly effective at killing most potentially harmful organisms, such as bacteria, viruses, and parasites. Basic shit, folks. Filter your water.
Yep.
It's done a really good job of preventing disease. In fact, before chlorination, typhoid, cholera, dysentery, and diarrhea outbreaks were common in cities around the world. Treating the water helped reduce these health problems, but with treatment advances also came potential side effects. In 1974, scientists discovered that chlorine itself could react with naturally occurring materials in the water to create these DPBs, substances that form when the disinfectant reacts with natural compounds in the water. Sadly, many of these have been shown to cause cancer, including THMs, or referred to as TTHMs, which are a group of chemical compounds.
Trihalomethanes.
Those two. In the last 40 years, we've discovered more than 600 other DPBs in chlorinated tap water, including haloacetic acids, HAAs. Ha! That's jokes on us. If you look at your water quality report or you look up your water system at EWG's tap water database, it's free. Just enter your zip code. You'll be horrified to see THMs or HAs listed. Or you might see one of the four chemicals in the total trihalomethanes group, chloroform, the
bromidichloromethane,
bromodichloromethane,
dibromochloromethane,
and
bromoform.
Bromoform. That sounds like it's right at South Park. Bromoform.
Yeah.
So what it uncovered was that nationwide test results from 2019 to 23 found that nearly 6,000 community water systems across 49 states and DC had at least one instance of unsafe levels of THMs. Awesome.
What?
These toxic chemicals linked to increased risks of bladder and colorectal cancer, as well as birth defects, are a direct result of the interaction between disinfectants and organic pollutants flowing into drinking water. Again, all of this stuff just makes logical sense. This is a wake-up call. Yes, thank you from the Environmental Working Group's Midwest Director. Manure from factory farms is polluting our water supplies, and when utilities try to make that water safe to drink, they unintentionally create another public health hazard that increases the risk of cancer and birth defects. That is really your thesis right there.
And I'm sure farm runoff, same problem.
Right, but the factory farming where they're doing it at such mass scale is where you've got the problem.
Yes.
Farm runoff is one thing, that can be dealt with by chemicals. Right. So there's a graphic that kind of here's like a nice long infographic that she can share, how it becomes toxic chemicals that end up in our drinking water.
Right.
Right. So there's a lot more here. What can we do? I know learning about DBPs and MCLs is not always top of mind, but it's so important to stay educated on what's happening with our water. Water emergencies turn into health emergencies. And you should be filtering your water separate, possibly in addition from the tap, for sure. All right?
You're learning so many important things.
I'm proud of you.
And I'm so proud of you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. If manure is contributing to this issue, then it seems like the next step is to reduce the amount of livestock manure and large-scale animal operations that gets into drinking water sources. Right? I feel like that's the Natalie Portman Star Wars meme right there. So we're going to do that, right? Research shows...
But we don't have time for rational solutions.
Right. Research shows that the ways that farms manage animal waste do not protect water sources from the waste pollution. Current regulations that require the largest animal factories to discharge and manage manure in certain ways do not adequately protect water. Nice. Perfect. I don't see any issue there. Particularly in rural areas, we need to turn up efforts to prevent manure from getting into sources of drinking water, to help reduce the amount of disinfection byproduct levels. That would be nice. Currently, the EPA, led by New York douchebag ex-Congressman Lee Zeldin, the EPA requires manure management plans only from the largest farms, which make up just 2% of all animal feeding operations. So we're really attacking the problem by going after 2% of the problem. Minnesota has a buffer law which requires grasses or shrubs to be grown in a permanent buffer up to 50 feet wide between a farm field and a body of water, which helps reduce runoff. Sounds like a great strategy that more states could potentially learn from. Maybe, if it works. The 2022 IRA began to send more money to farmers for conservation practices until the current administration started to freeze a lot of that IRA conservation funding. Thanks a lot, Trump. Billions of dollars have been cut off, or actually that's more probably Doge than the Trump administration, but funds for farmers to implement conservation practices, some of which could help reduce manure runoff. I don't know how much actually would. Water treatment systems also can help. Using treatments like enhanced coagulation, granular activated carbon, or nanofiltration to remove organic matter from water before it's disinfected can also help reduce the formation of disinfection byproducts, including those TTHMs. The issue here is also about money. The money, Lebowski. Right? At home, using activated carbon or reverse osmosis filtration systems tend to be the best defense against DPBs. I see a lot about Zero Water. The product Zero Water apparently does a very good job. To see a map of all community water systems in the U.S. that provide drinking water for more than 3,300 people, where at least one test contained TTHMs or the MCL of 80 parts per billion. She's got a link for that there. There's also an interactive map created by the National Environmental Group Food and Water Watch that shows a comprehensive picture of factory farm domination in America. Factory farm domination that only makes up 2%, or at least the ones that are large enough to be regulated only make up 2%. The resource, which is based on the USDA Census of Agriculture, includes density rankings that reveal the extreme concentration of factory farms and their waste in communities across the country. See, I would have figured it would just be in the Midwest. If we want clean water, we must look at all the ways that our water systems are challenged and be willing to course correct with proper resources. This almost makes me think of like the Man Bear Pig episode of Super Serial, guys, where he's in his presentation, in his slideshow, I remember this, like to the early 2000s. He talked about how you have to attack the environmental problem stages at a time, and he was carbon sequestration and restoration of this and regulations to this, and we're going to have to add our way into it because any one thing isn't going to do it and isn't going to be enough, which I agree with. All right, so Erin Brockovich, the Brockovich Report, fantastic. TheBrockovichReport.com. Suzanne Boothby also writes over there with her. She's been with her since the day she started it. And I believe the very first episode of How Do We Miss That, we covered an Erin Brockovich story. We've been following and supporting her Substack effort since 2021. We will not be remonetized for doing a story like that. Water ain't sexy. It's not sexy. Oh, you got to get that on the soundboard. I want that on the side. I just pointed to Reefy, though nobody can see that.
No.
It's not sexy.
Nope.
Yeah. So, not my cow. I don't know. They're talking about their moo cows, and somebody has a cow. That's awesome.
Ask them.
Ask them. Ask who? No,
Ask them.
no, I don't want to ask them. I don't want her to ask anyone.
Journalists, ask them the question.
We will, the way to monetize and support INN, journalists who will ask them the question. God almighty. Cash App, $Indie News Network, Ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, PayPal.me/Indie News Network, INNnewsletter.com, and at IndieMediaToday.com as well. Let's go back here.
Money, please.
Let me, one more thing, that these highlighted names are the ones that regularly give and subscribe and support, and those are like the top of the leaderboard for our supporters. So we wanted to do a little something extra for those folks. So thank you, really. Support independent media, kids, because we need it more than ever. And I love you, and have a good night, fam.
Keep listening to what boats have to tell you.
No! We just fucking lost the stream!
Can keep giving us nothing and think we're bluffing about coming for your heads. Why play civil if you won't listen to 50,000 dead? And now we know our mission, we form a militia, make Congress a prison.